over almost the past 20 years reduces suicide rates in target audiences that would be specific to veterans, males ages 20 to 40, on average of around 10%. So if we can save 10% of the 22 veteran lives a day that we lose, which is actually kind of a conservative estimate of suicides, then I am all for doing that.
All right. David, you think this is a terrible idea?
I do. I think it's a perverse bill that will have very negative effects. I mean, I wish I could say the compassionate thing for those who serve, for our veterans, to say that where there's some way to help your suffering or your fear. Marijuana is the wrong choice. It is a powerful drug with many negative dimensions. Perversely, it's the worst thing you could do for someone who is suffering with psychological distress. The medical principle here is, first, do no harm, and the addition of marijuana to the medicines that are being received, the antidepressants, the antipsychotic medicines, is a great unknown, and it is strongly linked with the incidence of psychosis itself. It's the wrong thing, exactly the wrong move to make for a veteran who is suffering from PTSD.
Okay, TJ, you're suffering from PTSD. You say this provides you some comfort. What do you say to him?
Well, actually, the psychosis myth has been debunked recently through research and studies. I have tried the traditional routes of pharmaceuticals. I was on Depakote, Ativan, gabapentin, Zoloft, Abilify. They made me zombie-like. They made me more suicidal, more homicidal thoughts. And just, I was not able to function. When I decided to stop using those prescription drugs that the Veterans Health Administration was giving me and decided to start medicating with cannabis, I was able to function, I was able to participate in my children's lives, I was able to hold down a steady job, and I was able to be a more functioning member of society. I believe policy is misinformed, and people who say that this is a horrible drug are extremely misinformed.
David, he says it works for him.
Understood. That's an anecdote. That's not medical science. What you have to say is you want to be compassionate, but it's not compassionate if it's not true. Just last week, the Lancet Journal put out an analysis of the impact of marijuana use on first incidents of psychosis. It was responsible for an approximate 25% of new psychotic episodes. The evidence is mounting and it's highly dangerous. The Colorado Psychiatric Society has recently stated no doctor would mix together blending 25 different antipsychotics and antidepressants and then dispense them in an unknown manner. That's simply irresponsible. And there's something else at risk here, Steve. The integrity of the medical approval process for new drugs is being overwhelmed by politics. You don't vote on gravity. You don't vote on science. You don't have politics intruding into the integrity of the drug approval process. Okay. Marijuana has never been able to establish itself scientifically as therapeutically valuable, and we do know the risk that it portends, particularly people who have psychological difficulties. It is the wrong move, and it's the wrong process. Well, I'm stunned by the irresponsibility of this.
Let's see what the U.S. Senate does. Guys, thank you very much. Great discussion this morning.
Thank you.
I love how he ended that. Let's see what the U.S. Senate does. Fox News actually seems somewhat kind of, I don't want to say they support the marijuana movement. However, they are a lot more friendly than some local news outlets that I've dealt with. So that was me 2 days after the CARES Act was introduced in the U.S. Senate. And 2 days prior, I was in the press conference. You can find that video on Senator Gillibrand's, Kirsten Gillibrand's YouTube channel. I think she's the junior senator from New York State. And so the way I got there, like I was saying before the video footage, I started out in the veterans anti-war movement, working with post 9/11 veterans, fighting for our rights within the Veterans Health Administration, Veterans Affairs, because not much has been done to help veterans since Vietnam. A lot of people don't realize that the GI Bill, up until Senator Jim Webb, who was from Virginia, changed it to the post 9/11 veteran, was actually the Vietnam veterans GI Bill. So education benefits hadn't changed for veterans in 40 years until Senator Webb came along and did it. Senator Webb. And then so we don't see much progress quickly within the VA. And so I started working more so just on overall making peace, making amends for what I felt I had done wrong during my time in the military. Had a lot of great times. I call it the worst, best time of my life, because that's basically what it was. I'm 35, born and raised. I live probably 10 miles from where I grew up right now, Chesapeake, Virginia. Married, 2 kids. I joined the military to kind of escape I didn't see it as an abusive past, however, that's what it is. I figured out after years of therapy. And so I joined the military to get away from basically my stepdad, who I did not get along with at all. He was a retired senior chief in the Navy, which is a E8. And he just was a grouchy old man and hated anybody who wasn't white, straight, male Christian. And that to me wasn't the environment in which I wanted to live. So I told my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, I was like, I'm thinking about joining the Coast Guard just so I can get the hell out of his house. And she's like, don't do that, that'd be the most stupid decision you made. Next time I saw her, she was going to school about an hour away from where we grew up at William and Mary. And next time I saw her up in Williamsburg, I was like, oh, by the way, I'm not joining the Coast Guard, I'm joining the Navy. And it took me 45 days to get into the Navy because I couldn't pass the piss test. I scored high enough on the test that they didn't want me to go in with any waivers because I could do anything that I wanted to in the Navy. I had experience with cannabis at an early age, more recreationally. And then little did I know I was going to be coming back full circle to everything at 28 years old. And even to the point of the people I was studying as a teenager, now I'm sitting on panels speaking with them at conferences. Rick Doblin, for instance, the founder of MAPS, we were talking about him earlier. He was, indirect mentor that I saw his studies on lysergic acid when I was a teenager, and he revived the Timothy Leary studies, and I started studying his work, and now here it is this year I sat on a panel with him, and I'm telling him to scoot over so I could get up to the table. That was kind of a pride moment right there. So I got involved in organizing, and I realized a lot of veterans were using cannabis, like whether it's in place of alcohol because they hated where alcohol took them, or medically, or just recreationally, and still using alcohol. However, 80% of the post 9/11 veterans that I was hanging out with, and a lot of the not post 9/11 veterans I was hanging out with, were using cannabis. So I was like, we need to talk about this. So that's the first point of what I wanted to talk about today is removing the stigma of cannabis. And, a lot of people say, oh, we were making a joke about it earlier, cannabis. Don't call it pot, don't call it reefer, don't call it weed. I love all those names, honestly. And when people tell me you have to call it cannabis, I say, I don't give a damn what you call it, as long as you call it legal. That's all I care about. So I was like, let's just talk about it, because we all do it, so why don't we talk about it? And so I started talking about it, and then I wound up at a conference in Baltimore with a bunch of veterans, and a couple weeks later, a couple of vet friends of mine from Colorado had called me saying, hey, we want you to be on this radio station to talk about being a veteran in a non-medical state using cannabis medicinally. I was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do that. Let me go find some information about the VA. So I started doing searches, came across Michael Crowitz, and I called, left him a voicemail. He called me back 30 minutes later. 3 hours later, I knew every single thing there was to know about veterans and medical cannabis. And he was telling me, you're going to call Americans for Safe Access at the end of the weekend. You're going to tell them you're getting a scholarship because I said so. You're going to their conference, and you'll figure it out from there. And I'll guide you along the way. That's what's happened. In 2013, the end of 2013, I co-founded Safe Access Virginia, which is the Virginia arm of Americans for Safe Access. And a couple of people that had met at the conference in 2013 came up to me. They were students at Virginia Commonwealth University, and they're like, we'd love to have you as the chair to help us found this organization. And I said, okay, I'll do it. I decided after a year and a half of working with them that the Virginia General Assembly is the laughingstock of the American political system right now. So I was like, I'm not really being very successful at the General Assembly level. However, I'm seeing more responses in DC on Capitol Hill. So I start bugging Mike, I need to get involved in DC. He's plugging me in. All the while I'm just thinking, okay, well, I'm just gaining this information, I'll use it one day probably. And then it comes up the beginning of the year, I want to say about close towards the end of February, calls me up one day, he's like, hey TJ, you need to be ready to go to DC on a moment's notice in a couple weeks because I'm going to be out of the country working on UN stuff again. And so he told me to be ready to, work with a couple of senators that we had been talking back and forth about legislation, and then it came to pass that I was going to give the response on behalf of veterans for the CARES Act in the U.S. Senate press conference. So I went to D.C. and did that. Like I said, you can find that on Senator Gillibrand's YouTube page. It's an interesting thing because I got a little out of hand. I always tend to get a little fired up a lot of times when I talk. And I did. I told them they need to legalize it immediately, basically, to solve the 22 a day, to solve the pain pill problem. I gave them a list of stuff that we could do with legalized medical marijuana. So then earlier in the year, I'd asked Michael Krause, I'm like, hey, is there any way, I could maybe get a couple comp tickets to the Cannabis Cup in Denver? That's always been a bucket list item of mine. He's like, let me talk to my people that I know at High Times and find out. Next thing I know, I'm getting an email from Dan Sky, the editor of High Times, saying, hey, Mike Krause recommended you to be on a panel. He didn't tell me he was telling him that I was going to talk at the conference. I just wanted to go and hang out. So I spoke on a panel of, I think it was about 7 or 8 veterans from across the country, the Weed for Warriors Project. Kevin Richardson was on the panel. He's the founder of Weed for Warriors. And then some other people, Sean Azariti, who was the first person to legally purchase recreational marijuana in Colorado because they don't have post-traumatic stress on their medical bill. So Sean was not able to get medical marijuana for his post-traumatic stress. And so that's why they used him to bring that to light. And we all talked, and 7 of us there was somebody from Hawaii, people from Michigan, California, me, and probably a couple other people from other places. And there was a scientist on the panel that's from Canada, working with vets in Canada. And all the vets had the exact same story. We go to the VA, they give us pills, tell us to come back in 6 months to a year. And they'll be happy to give you all the free refills. You think you're at the drink bar at McDonald's because they give you all the refills of your pills. Yvonne and Jason saw me taking my pills this afternoon. I only take over-the-counter stuff and one muscle relaxer as needed now, but I mean, they just give you pills, and I think that their bonuses or something are based on how many prescriptions they write. So when I go to my doctors, I'm considered non-compliant because I tell them I use cannabis and I don't want their pills because their pills make me try and kill myself. Otherwise, I love living. So it's talking about it, just talking about it. Because I've had doctors when I first walk in their offices and they're like, oh no, another veteran pothead, basically. I can look at it in their eyes. But every time I go, are you still using cannabis? Yes. Do you think I'm going to stop? I'm not going to live if I stop. So it's just talk about it amongst your peers. Talk about it in church, for crying out loud. Like they were saying earlier, it was a holy anointing oil in the Old Testament. It was used to embalm bodies. They believed that was the main essence that they used to embalm the body of Jesus Christ when, he was supposedly put in the tomb. And so it is. If you're appealing to that religious side, that's fine. Do that. Let them know what it says in their Bible. And I appreciate they said that he kind of separates his beliefs with business. And that, that's tough for a lot of politicians to do. So it's talk about it. Talk about it. Share with your friends. Share, and just discuss how it affects life, how it affects daily life, because people think you're lazy people. Luckily, we're in the age of information, so you can go online and see there's gold medalists from the Olympics, there's successful business people, past presidents. I think something like the 4 or 5 past presidents or something have admitted to using cannabis. So talk about it. Get the stigma away from it, because it's like mental health problems. A lot of people don't talk about it. You know, you don't address post-traumatic stress. You don't address the people that live with bipolar daily. You just push them off to the side and forget about it. Well, don't do that. Bring them into your community. Share with them. You know, do the right human thing to do. Reduce the stigma. And so I basically started talking about stuff, and I'm just making sure I covered everything there because I don't use notes. And then I was like, well, I was put in my place in the peace movement by some African American female former Marines. And I mean, when I first started organizing work, I had no filter, but it was because of untreated post-traumatic stress and the environment in which I was raised, which is a very critical environment. And so I didn't know how to behave. And like I said, I lacked a filter, and a lot of veterans lack a filter because of our military experience. It doesn't even have to be a war experience, it's just how the military operates. And so I was put in my place, basically checked my privilege, and I learned about white male privilege because I was one of those people who said, oh no, white men are the ones being oppressed nowadays, and blah, blah, blah. And then I had people telling me, no, look at the stats. And now, you know, I am walking, talking ally for a lot of other social justice movements because I learned, okay, no, it is my community that has done, you know, centuries of oppression to people, and we need to work together to conclude that and move forward as a society. So I learned how to create an inclusive environment. And as where that really hit me hard was organizing on the state level, because I pissed a lot of parents of epileptic children off because I said, no, y'all are hurting what everyone is trying to do with asking for CBD rich only legislation. And because I don't really benefit much from high CBD strains. I need a lot of THC in my diet. That's how I operate. And that's the beautiful thing about cannabis is you don't have to have the exact science of it to know that it works. You just, and it's person to person. My wife, she'll claim she tried it and she hated it. So, you know, but she'll tell you that if it wasn't for cannabis and her and my kids, I probably wouldn't be here today. So you know, and it doesn't work for everybody. You know, it's not like it's the perfect cure-all drug. However, we need to invite everybody to the table, whether it's law enforcement. You don't want law enforcement on regulatory bodies, though. I will tell you that much, because law enforcement and regulatory bodies in the cannabis legalization movements across states have not worked out too well. But you still want them to come together to discuss their concerns. Parents, you know, epileptic children have a lot different needs than the average medical cannabis patient. Veterans, and within the veteran community itself, you know, it's a very weird environment because you have people from all walks of life. I can put on my extremely conservative clothes tomorrow, go talk to an extremely I worked with North Carolina Ramp earlier this year, and you know, and it's telling the same story. It's just how your words are put together, and be sensitive to other people's needs when working for legalization issues. And we also need to convince many people. So elected officials, including them in our conversations, we talk bad about them all the time. We always talk about how horrible of a job they do, how, oh man, if people just showed up to vote, they wouldn't be there. If they didn't run unopposed every election, they wouldn't be there. Don't talk about them. Include them in the conversation. Tell them you think they're doing a horrible job. My congressman is Randy Forbes, and he is one of the worst people in Congress. He is a ranking member on the Judiciary Committee. He founded the Congressional Prayer Caucus, and he says that God directly guides him for his leadership in DC. So he has direct conversations with God before he makes decisions is what I interpret that as. And so Randy Forbes is a very tough nut to crack. And it hurts me because I work with all these other people in the House, people in the U.S. Senate, and they listen. They say, okay, yeah, we get that. We understand. Maybe we can fix this veteran suicide epidemic. Maybe we can fix this opioid epidemic. I met with the Office of National Drug Control Policy, which is the drug czar's office. That's a cabinet position within the White House. And you know, I talked to them. However, Randy Forbes, this guy who has never done absolutely a single thing in close to 20, 25 years in Congress, you know, I can't even really tell him about cannabis. He won't listen. However, I still include him in the conversation. This year, I had a meeting with they have military liaisons if they're involved in like making decisions with veterans or the military. And I think Forbes serves on the active duty military committee. I can't remember the name of it right. Armed Services Committee. And like, so I met with his military liaison. His military liaison gave me a little smidgen of hope this year. However, then 2 months later, Randy Forbes ruined it with something he said in the media. But I sent Randy Forbes a scathing email, and I forgot to address it to my direct contact in his office. And if like they were saying earlier, if you receive a direct contact, go straight to that person. Do not send it to anybody else, because that person is going to make sure it gets to where you need it to get. And so I sent the scathing email, forgot to include my direct contact, and I sent it to a couple other people in the office, luckily. And I was going to be up there lobbying a week later, and I didn't even think about it, but I got a call from him 2 days later. He's like, even though you forgot to send that to me, it wound up on my desk because it was so mean. And I was a little bit proud of myself because I just laid into him and told him how he doesn't represent the interests of his constituents. He only represents big corporate interests and the military-industrial complex, and just, you know, threw a bunch of facts out at him in the email. And you know, and even though I'm not changing his mind directly, maybe, just maybe, when that vote comes up, he might say yes because I've given him facts and information and including him in the conversation. So always create an inclusive environment regardless. And that's kind of one of the fun things for me, is going toe to toe with these people that I do not want to work with, because it shows my character. It shows that although I don't like the job you're doing, I can still come together, try to find common ground, and work with you. So that is creating an inclusive environment. And when you reduce the stigma and create an inclusive environment, you empower people. And with empowerment, that was a big thing in my healing from my trauma, was empowerment. Nobody knows me from Adam 3 years ago in this movement. And today I'm getting calls from people like Yvonne from, you know, Americans for Safe Access, Drug Policy Alliance. All these groups are asking me because they gave me a chance to tell my story. I shared my story, proved my credibility, and they empowered me. And it's so awesome because even though I am in the straight white male category, most of my empowerment in the movement has come from other marginalized communities, because being veterans are a marginalized community in the country, because we suffer a lot of health problems at a much higher rate than the rest of the country does, and we are not that large of a population. So I've been empowered by people in the civil rights movement. Neil Franklin of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, you know, talking to him, Steph Shearer, the executive director of Americans for Safe Access, like, it was awesome when I learned that I could just, like, shoot her a straight email or call her, and she just, because in my eyes, she's the one that's on top of things, because she's the one that's in charge of the medical marijuana movement overall. And Americans for Safe Access is an amazing group. You know, NORML is doing great stuff at the state level, and they're empowering people. There's this lady, and I can't remember her name, down in Southern California, NORML, that worked together with us on some issues with pain management clinics and veterans being kicked out. But it was NORML that came together and brought the issue up to people, talking about it, and they weren't even like the people that brought it up weren't even veterans. They were just allies of veterans that were like, hey, this is messed up. We shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be taking our vets off of their pain pills just because they're participating in the state cannabis program. And they were actually able to remove that director of that region's network of VA hospitals and fix the problem of vets not having safe access in that area. And so it's empowering people. So you talk about things, you include everybody, and you build the community up. So we all come together as one, and when our voices come together as one, that's when we actively participate in the democratic process. So with all of this, 3 years ago, or a little bit more than 3 years ago now, I guess, I was a zombie. I mean, that's how my wife would describe me when I was on the pills, and most of my friends too. And I had a great support network. A lot of veterans, the reason they go into the military is because they don't have a support network. I just happen to have a support network, so I've survived myself for the last 35 years. And so you build the community up, and you work with people, and you just help everybody out, and it all comes together. And I was built up. I couldn't do it on my own 3 years ago. I was extremely suicidal. I couldn't even come out of my room, more than 3 days a week, just because it was just too much for me. And then here it is this year. I still have to decompress. I'm not going to tell you I'm like completely cured of my symptoms and all. However, I'm able to get out and do stuff like this. I'm able to be active in my children's lives. I'm able to maintain a steady full-time job. I am not a burden upon the system. And if I were to stay on the pills that the VA was giving me, I would be a burden upon the system. And it all came from that little bit of people saying, hey, TJ, you're worth something. Go out there and tell them your story and let them know. And, I always make the joke about empowerment with Drug Policy Alliance. And if you're unfamiliar with their work, look them up. A lot of people complain about them because they are for the legalization and regulation of all drugs across the globe. However, they are the ones that have all the backing to get medical marijuana legislation passed. Them and Marijuana Policy Project are very active in the legislation process. But I always make the joke about Drug Policy Alliance. Like, they gave me the biggest sense of empowerment ever. I mean, giving me the microphone in front of a U.S. Senate press conference, I don't know anybody else who has done. Actually, I think Mike Crowett said I beat him to doing that, and he's been doing this work for like the last 15, 20 years. And here it is, he just happened to be out of the country, so I had to, again, take second chair to him and go do that. So it's lifting people up when they're down at their worst and their depths, because you never know. Making eye contact, saying, hey, how you doing, sincerely, not just walking by somebody, but that's little things of empowerment. Like staying with Yvonne and Jason this weekend. I mean, I'm feeling great because the conversations we've had and the fact, I wasn't raised to be accepting of people that were different than me. So to come into the community and be fully accepted, none of us knowing each other, that just makes me feel great. It gives me all those warm and fuzzies inside.
I've got a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think now do you see more of a coming together of all of these organizations for different kinds of cannabis reform? Do you see now that we are having more of a coming together between the full legalization community and the medical community?
Well, the situation with that is a weird one, and this is where we have to play the political games. And it's and I don't think we will ever necessarily see that happen as you phrased the question, because we have seen more successes with separating the movements, including hemp, and this I learned on the state level. In Virginia, last year we came together at the Virginia NORML conference. I was speaking on a panel there. The leader of the Virginia Industrial Hemp Coalition was speaking on a panel, and it was the NORML Virginia NORML conference, and so I was the director of Safe Access Virginia, and then we had the other two directors, and we met and discussed exactly that. Should we all lobby together, or should we lobby separate? You know, should we try and lump everything? Should we get patients to testify for a decrim bill when we have a medical bill that's going to go through soon? And we decided, and I don't know if it was my influence or if we collectively decided, because they knew I was leaving at that point to work more on federal stuff at the end of the year. But we decided to keep it separate because other states, Colorado being a prime example, Colorado is a very conservative regulatory program, and when I'm out there, they get mad at me because I asked my question to most of the people in Colorado is, do you feel Colorado is about to regulate itself out of a marijuana industry? Because looking at it from the outside, there are a lot of regulations, and all my friends that work in the industry out there complain about every little detail they have to go through to deal with it. But they separated the movement, so they were able to get medical first. Hemp got legalized when the Farm Bill passed, and then they got recreational. And so that's kind of the model. You know, everybody says, well, let's wait and see what Colorado does. I'm sure y'all hear it in Tennessee. But that's what we hear in Virginia all the time. Well, let's see what happens in Colorado. What? My kids are like not having like they have to share papers per class in school for tests because they don't have enough printer paper by the end of the year. Yet Colorado is building brand new roads and sending kids to, you know, nice new playgrounds at schools and stuff that we can't afford because we can't even, you know, we're in a budget deficit trying to figure out how to just come out with an even balance at the end of the year in Virginia. So it's, as much as I would love, again, I want an inclusive environment. I want everybody together. However, the way the political system is set up, it's tough to push legislation. And you have to listen to what your state legislature says to you. And that, like, I know it's a horrible thing to say, however, it is their house. They are the ones that are elected into office. And as we were talking about earlier today, although we complain about the job most of these politicians do, they do work very hard at doing a horrible job. So they work, I will give them that. They are hardworking people for as horrible of a job that they do. And
we're running shorter on time.
All right.
Let's talk about the good news for vets.
The good news for vets. Oh, yeah, I almost forgot about that. So, I've been lobbying all year on this. So, CARES Act was the main bill that we pushed. Last year, we tried, last year was the first year of medical cannabis legislation on Capitol Hill in D.C. And we pushed a bunch of stuff, criminal justice reform stuff in their bills. That's where you hear the DEA, DOJ can't prosecute in legal states. We had an amendment called the Veterans Equal Access Amendment, and it failed. So this year, we reintroduced it in the House. I lobbied that for like 2 or 3 days. Appropriations bills are some of the worst bills to lobby because they come up at a second's notice. And so the Veterans Equal Access Amendment basically stated that right now there's a policy that was enacted in the VA in 2011 stating that providers are not allowed to discuss medical cannabis with their patients. They're not allowed to sign any state documents. However, VA providers are required by Congress to provide signatures for all of our health-related forms as disabled veterans. So it was a catch-22 for them. And they're scared. That's their livelihood. So they're rightfully scared to step on any toes. And so we decided, you know, we've been pushing this amendment that lifts that gag order, and then also that gag order expires at the end of the year. So what Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access has been pushing is we need to do something. And so this Veterans Equal Access Amendment, it failed the House earlier this year by 3 votes. One congressman said he misread it and misvoted no. Another one, Morgan Griffith, he is actually Michael Crowitz's congressman. He was Michael Crowitz's delegate in Virginia before he went to the U.S. Congress. But Morgan Griffith said he voted no because he didn't believe it went far enough. And then there was a third one that was a Democrat, and since the Republicans control the floor of the House, they cut the voting off when they realized that Democrat was missing and hadn't voted yet. And that's how they do it there. Like, whoever controls the floor controls how much time they get on a vote. So they cut it off. We lost by 3 votes. That was during the spring. Fast forward to last week, the day before Veterans Day. I'm sitting in my office at work, and I get a email from Drug Policy Alliance saying, "Hey, TJ, just to let you know, I need a quote for you, just in case the Senate passes this amendment today." The Senate unanimously passed it 93-0 in the VA military construction appropriations bill. And basically, it now has to cross back over to the House since they didn't put it in, and all budget bills are supposed to originate in the House. So now the House has to vote on the amendment again. However, it's gonna kinda be a medical marijuana vote, even though it's not really, because they aren't voting to legalize medical marijuana. They're just voting to give veterans access to the same things that civilians in their states with legal programs have. Because our doctors are VA and mandated by Congress, whereas y'all go to private providers. And so I can't remember all the information said the last time the Senate had a unanimous vote on a subject like an appropriations bill, and it's been a while. But to get our Congress to work together on something, we always hear these stories about them not working together. And Chuck Grassley is the senator, the chair of the committee where I think it's the Judiciary Committee. What's that? Judiciary Committee, where the CARES Act has been sitting since March, and they haven't had a hearing for it. That's our next step with the CARES Act. So we know Grassley voted yes for this amendment. This amendment is pretty much the exact verbiage of the veterans portion of the CARES Act. And the CARES Act is broken down into 8 different sections addressing veterans, banking, epilepsy, state-run 10th Amendment right medical marijuana programs, which says states have the rights to enact their own laws if Congress does not do so, and as long as it doesn't go against federal law. And CARES Act will make federal law to respect states' rights. And reschedules to 2. I say those of us that are lobbying the bills are not that concerned about that. Because if we get everything else, we aren't worried about scheduling. And because we actually don't even want it scheduled. Because it's a natural herbal supplement, much like melatonin or St. John's wort or whatever. And we actually had a monograph released in the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia last year, which...
J. Marcoux?
Yep. Oh, God, I love J-Han. If you ever get a chance to hear Dr. Jehan Marcoux speak, listen, because he has lots of knowledge. Dr. Meshulam that was spoke about, there's a documentary just came out about him, The Scientist. You can find it on YouTube. Watch it if you think you want to talk to anybody about medical marijuana. Dr. Meshulam was the first scientist to isolate THC. He's an Israeli scientist, and just phenomenal. I learned stuff, and I know a lot about Dr. Meshulam's work already, and I learned stuff watching the documentary, so I recommend that. So CARES Act is, it addresses a lot of the concerns, the major concerns. It's not a fix. It's not like a permanent fix. This is just to get us to the next step. So what can we do for cannabis legalization? Veterans, we love having the support. However, a lot of veterans don't want to be further marginalized. And so a lot of veterans are reluctant to work with groups like NORML or ASA or DPA, SSDP. Because they don't want us to be pushed out front and used as, a poster child against our will. Veterans lead from the front. That's why we joined the military, because we have this drive in us or something, I don't know what it is, and we want to do our own thing, and that's where veterans go. And we're a great portion of the communities because we suffer certain things at a much higher rate, be it homelessness, illnesses. So we're a controlled community because we get our care within the VA. So the strategy that we have is we're a great kind of almost test platform as long as we're getting what we want. We're not gonna let, you as somebody who's never interacted with the VA go to the VA and say, hey, this person needs this person needs that, and you just don't understand as an ally what the people in the actual community get. It's the same with any other type of community. I can't go speak on behalf of lawyers because I don't have the real life experience of a lawyer. So veterans are, that's why you hear so much talk about veterans, because we have a direct petition to Congress because they make laws with the VA. And so the CARES Act, don't just focus on veterans. However, that's why I'm here, is to talk about veterans. And but it's a lot of things. Learn the CARES Act. Talk to your congressperson. Talk to your state and federal senators. Talk to your state level representatives. I don't know what they are, and what do they call them in Tennessee? Is it delegate?
General Assembly.
Okay.
Two chambers, House.
Yeah. We Virginia is the original American Democratic Republic bicameral system, still the exact same system that Thomas Jefferson theorized, stuck in the same time, it seems like some days. What's that?
I have another question.
All right, yeah, I'll get to you in just a second. So work with your local politicians, work with groups. Don't just say, I'm a member of NORML, I'm not gonna work with patients. But if you don't wanna work with patients, that's fine. Work on legalization. Find out about the incarceration rates and minority communities. Find out about how the elderly are dealing with Alzheimer's and dementia through cannabis use. Find these little things out. Learn about the science of it. I am not a big fan of science, personally. Knowing the knowledge just gets jumbled in my head. However, learning the science of marijuana has taught me a lot. My vice chair, Mohammed Mustafa, actually, he just presented a poster at the National Institutes of Health recently on cannabinoids. But he taught me so much about the science because he was able to bring it down to my level so I could understand it. Learn. You always hear CBD, THC. There are over 140 isolated cannabinoids in that plant, 60 of which only occur in that plant. So what about all these other cannabinoids? THCV, does anybody even know about THCV?
I do.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest cannabinoids in the plant for post-traumatic stress. But most people don't know about it because it's a recently isolated cannabinoid. And even in legal states, they don't do enough of an analysis because they don't understand the cannabinoids because they can't research them. So no, do your homework. What was your question?
I know what it was.
All right.
Okay, you've worked in and around with several different cannabis organizations through, speaking at their events and being directly involved with other organizations. What do you see as why people aren't out getting that involved? How do you contend with, you've got all these people and all they want to do is whine and complain all the time? Is this a common part of this movement?
You're gonna hate my actual answer to this, but then I will elaborate. I don't have time to deal with those people.
So
I honestly don't have time to. If they
how
aren't
do
gonna
you
stand up beside me,
how do
then
you effectively get, because this is not gonna go anywhere in Tennessee without action.
right.
How have you seen groups and people get people pretty much off their butts and on the street and doing, visiting with their reps, hanging up posters, coming to meetings, putting up signs, going to rallies, going to events, how have you seen,
Tell them they'll get free weed when it's legal. I don't know. Yes, sir.
Forgive me for being late.
Oh, you're fine.
I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Tennessee passed it the other day. Cannabis for vets, didn't I see that?
that was.
No, the
the
U.S.
national.
U.S. Senate passed the Veterans Equal Access Amendment the day before Veterans Day, and it's an appropriations bill amendment. So what it does is it doesn't allow the Department of Veterans Affairs to spend money to prevent doctors from openly discussing medical marijuana in states where it's legal, which could lead to a doctor, if that provider wishes, to writing a legal recommendation in that state as a VA healthcare provider.
But I saw Haslam's name. Haslam said blah, 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 medical marijuana. Didn't nobody?
It
am I
might have
the
just
guy
been
that-
something.
There
was a medical bill.
I got Google set up where I get every alert regarding the state and nation. And at this juncture, we're not there yet.
I'll
You
probably
have these
see
state-
that.
Okay, we need to,
State Senate review
winding
on
down.
September first of a GOP bill.
There
I'll-
was a
I'll
medical
look it up.
CBD
I
only
thought this
bill.
was a done deal.
No. So to answer your question more in depth on a unbiased side of things, I would personally rather work with a small group of people that are very dedicated and can get themselves out there and do the legwork than have a large group of 100 people in one, chapter or whatever. However, like we were discussing, her and I were discussing earlier today, people need to get in where they fit in. The old 80s saying, or what, get in where you fit in, 80s or 90s saying. So if you have lots of money to donate in no time, donate your money. If you're good at social media, not good in public situations, work on social media, volunteer your time on social media. If you're a great leader, volunteer to serve on the board.
I'd like to add something to what she said, the same kind of thing, what you're going on right now
Mhm.
about. I have tremendous issues staying on a day schedule, so I'm usually not able to do things, even though.
Right.
You don't, I didn't talk to you, you don't understand how much me and you are almost exactly alike. It's
Mhm.
scary, even. But I wish I could do what you do. I would love to go around the country. It's not even the money issue, it's the scheduling
Right,
issue.
yeah.
But I believe that while that is very important, there are other things you can do to help out, things like educating yourself.
Right, and that's where you start. I have spent, oh my gosh, my kids know more about marijuana, like just the science and everything, than the average activist.
Yeah.
Because I sit there and watch videos, lectures,
I
read.
think that's also something that's
Yeah.
focused on more is the getting out there aspect.
Yeah.
And there's too much misinformation in the movement to begin with. I
Yeah.
think activists also should educate themselves.
If you want to get out there, you have to start with a good, solid foundation. I didn't get here just saying, "Hey, me, pick me. I want to be on the kickball team." I showed that I had knowledge and could absorb everything that everybody was throwing at me, be it policy lawyers, be it courtroom lawyers, be it researchers, be it practicing doctors, be it, people in the Office of National Drug Control Policy. I've proven that I have absorbed the knowledge to other people to put me in the position where I am. So don't think I just said one day, "Hey, I want to go talk about weed in front of a bunch of people." That's not how it goes. My wife actually, because she's a very introverted person, and she doesn't get how I can just dedicate so much time for so little personal gain to this. And
Yeah.
because what I see is I'm helping myself by helping everybody else. And if I can share my story and it touches somebody to get off their butt and go do something, then I've done my job. And that's what it is. It's organizing 101. So create an inclusive environment, remove the stigma, and empower those around you. And that's how we're going to win it.
Yeah.
So thank you for your time. Thanks for having me. And we can talk outside probably.
Well, that's why
Yeah.
I wanted to give time to everybody to be able to talk a bit.